Hi, this is Carolyn Cooper, and today's guest is Warren Kinghorn. He's an amazing author, and you'll find out all about him when we do our introductions. His book is called Wayfaring, A Christian Approach to Mental Health Care. I am excited about this content, and I know you will be too. If you want to really understand what it means to deal with mental health issues from a Christian perspective, this book is really going to open your eyes to the possibilities. Thanks for joining me today. Welcome to Mental Health and Faith, a closer look. I'm Carolyn Cooper, and my ministry name is Mental Health Connect. My mission is to offer encouragement and to help you find your way into this complicated world. The episodes will feature guests such as authors, pastors, mental health professionals, and many other individuals who have something to contribute to this conversation. There will be links and resources in the show notes. You'll want to check those out. Now sit back and enjoy the show. Hi, this is Carolyn, and my guest today is Warren Kinghorn. I am so excited that he is here to share with us about his book, and it's called Wayfaring. I'm going to just give you a quick bio, and then he's going to introduce himself and we'll get started. Warren Kinghorn is a psychiatrist and a theological ethicist whose work centers on the role of religious communities in caring for persons with mental health problems and on how Christians engage practices of modern health care. Jointly appointed to the faculties of Duke Divinity School and the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences of Duke University Medical Center, he is co-director of the Theology, Medicine, and Culture Initiative at Duke Divinity School and practices psychiatry at the Durham VA Medical Center. So you're a little bit busy, it sounds like.
That's right. Yeah.
So thank you for coming, taking time to come today. Is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know about you, Warren?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks, Carolyn, for having me on the podcast. It's really an honor to speak with you and to share about the book and about the ideas in it. What you just read is the kind of thing that shows up on the back of a book.
Mhm.
I think I'd want people to know that I grew up in upstate South Carolina as a Southern Baptist and came to faith in a Baptist church and went to college in South Carolina. And then I went to medical school right out of college, and I ended up at Harvard Medical School in Boston. And I found myself as this like Southern evangelical kid who was in this amazing academic medical center in Boston, uh, surrounded by all of these amazing hospitals and labs, and wondering what is all this for? Like all of this wealth and power and prestige that our culture centers in modern medicine. What is it all for? And what is health? And what is mental health? And what does it mean to live in our bodies well? And what does it mean to pursue a good life? And the more that I studied, the more I realized I was getting a good medical education, but medical education wasn't going to answer those questions because they were more theological questions, they were philosophical questions. And so I ended up actually leaving medical school for a couple of years, going to seminary, to divinity school at Duke, and got a theological degree. And that helped me as a Christian to kind of make sense of what I was doing as a physician in modern medicine. And that's one of the things that led me into psychiatry also. For the last 20 years or so now, I've been at Duke as a psychiatry resident and then as a faculty member. And I teach in the medical and divinity schools at Duke. And I co-direct a really wonderful initiative called the Theology, Medicine, and Culture Initiative. And Duke is kind of a weird place. It's a big secular research university, but it's got a Christian seminary in the middle of it. So we're located in the seminary, and we get to invite clinicians, mental health clinicians, physicians, nurses, others, chaplains into the seminary to study what does it mean to be a Christian in the world of healthcare. We exist to connect the world of healthcare and the world of Christian faith. And we always invite people to come consider studying with us and learning from us because we really want to equip the church's healthcare practitioners.
That sounds like a wonderful initiative. And I'm sure that in that process is where you started developing the content for the book, I'm
Yeah,
guessing.
That's right.
because one of the things I'm actually would like to read a couple of quotes from the foreword that was written by John Swinton, who is also a theologian. Is that correct?
Yeah. And a
And,
nurse. Yeah. Hmm.
and a nurse as well.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So I'd like to read a couple of excerpts from the foreword just so that to kind of tease a little bit on what this book is all about. And then I'd like to have you share a little bit more about the book, just kind of a summary to get started. So in
Great.
the foreword, Swinson says, the pull of technology, genetics, pharmacology, and neurobiology tempts us to focus our attention on problems rather than people. But the fullness of people matters. And in context, in a better context, it's basically talking about healthcare and mental health care specifically. And being a person who is a peer and a mental health consumer, I guess is a term that is used at times. Uh, I have felt many times that it was just that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Just the machine, as you'll
Yeah.
share with us a little bit
Yeah.
later. And then on the next page of the foreword, he says, Kinghorn recognizes that when viewed through a theological lens, people living with mental health challenges deserve more than what science alone can offer. I read that, I highlighted that, I wrote a note beside it that says, Amen, because that is that's so insightful and so profound.
Yeah.
So, can you give us a little bit more information about the book, just kind of a little summary and comment on the on what I just read if you'd like to?
Yeah, of course. I mean, first, I'd want to say John Swinton is an amazing both theologian and person who writes really beautifully about theology and mental health. So, if any of your listeners want to learn more, he's got several really great books that are touching on that. Um, this book, and we're going to be talking about this over the course of the conversation, but this book is my attempt to, as a psychiatrist, to find a way through maybe a little bit of tension that I often hear from Christians relate in terms of how we're to relate to mental health care. And I hear this especially among college students whom I work with at Duke and elsewhere. On the one hand, I think many Christians are reluctant to seek mental health care. You know, they've heard from their churches and from lots of things that psychology and psychiatry are these like secular, godless disciplines, and you should stay away from them. And that's one thing that I sometimes hear. It's actually just as common, if not more common, for me to hear, especially from Christian young people now, that like mental health care is a great thing. Like we should
Mhm.
have more of it. The only thing that's wrong with it is there's not enough of it. And so whenever you have an opportunity to be in therapy or to consider medications or other things, that's a great thing. And listen, I'm a psychiatrist. I love the world of mental health care and I love the work of psychiatry. But I think this book is actually trying to kind of challenge both those views. And for those who say that no Christians shouldn't engage mental health care, I'd say no. Like mental health care is a gift of God. It can be a gift of God and can be something that can help us and can help to strengthen us and to encourage us. I think on the other hand, I want to say though that like how we engage mental health care matters and
Mhm.
who we're seeing matters and how we're learning to understand ourselves in the context of care matters. And the key image that I use in the book is how do we think of ourselves and have others think of us not as machines that need to be fixed, but as wayfarers or those who are on a journey who need to be accompanied and cared for and guided and loved. And I think that's what we need as human beings.
Thank you for sharing. That really helps us understand, I think, kind of the motivation you have for writing this book and just kind of an idea of what we can expect. But in some ways, it's kind of about balance, isn't it? I
Mm.
mean, we have to have, I personally know that I need medication as part of
Yeah,
my treatment plan.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
my husband will never let me stop taking it again because
That's
there was a
right.
time as a Christian, I thought, I'm a Christian. I'm doing much better now.
Yeah,
I can make it without it. Nope.
yeah,
But I am a person, I'm a Christian, and I need the behavioral kinds of things to go along and
that's right.
along with the medicine, I need a lot more than just a pill to take.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's right. I mean, there's a lot of different kinds of medications that I prescribe as a psychiatrist, and I work in the VA system. I prescribe medications for most of my patients. I think medications can be incredibly helpful. They can help to reduce distress. They can help people who are really severely depressed or anxious to be able to find ways to go on and to engage other kinds of support and care. They can sometimes, when people are contemplating suicide, they can be very helpful in sort of helping to curb some of those thoughts. And so medications can be very helpful. I would say that it's very rare that medications are the only solution
Mhm.
for what somebody's going through. And so with my patients, I often use the image of the starting line and the finish line. And so I'll say to them, like a medication is probably not going to get you to the finish line if the finish line is where you absolutely want to be in your life and your relationships. And medication it's just not going to deliver probably that, but it can help you to get to the starting line where you can begin to do the kind of work in therapy, the kind of work in engaging in community, kind of things that are within our power to be able to do to be able to move forward. And so I think medications can be very helpful in helping to move people to the starting line and continuing, as you say, to be a kind of support along the way as people, find a life of fulfillment and purpose and joy and happiness. And of course, Christians understand that as a journey to God.
Mhm. I want to read another little excerpt because it's so good. And this is from the introduction. And I will say, okay, if you are a person who's going to read this book, and if you're the person that says, oh, I don't need to read the introduction, yes, you do. The introduction to this book is fantastic. I really want to compliment you, Warren, on your writing. It's so enjoyable to read, so clearly thought out and presented. And this introduction really will set the foundation for the rest of the book, I think, from reading it myself. But this is on page 16 of the introduction. And what you've written here says, in chapter 1 of this book, I present a historical and conceptual account of the machine metaphor in modern mental health care. And then a little further down it says, in the remaining chapters of the book, and this is where I got really excited, in the remaining chapters of the book, I draw on scripture, philosophy, psychology, and on the thought of Thomas Aquinas to inform a different version of mental health care, focused not on the machine metaphor, but on the image of the human as wayfarer. So, Warren, what I'd like you to do, we've already talked a little about the machine mindset, but if you want to talk a little bit more about that, but I really want to focus more on the rest of the book
Yeah,
after chapter 1, where you use uh, the teachings of Thomas Aquinas as
yeah.
part of this approach, because I'm fascinated by that.
The machine metaphor is basically the idea that throughout the last couple hundred years of modern medicine, and this has crept into psychology and mental health care too, there's been this persistent way of thinking about the body as a machine that can break and gets rusty or gets burn out or has parts that break and that if there's a disease, the body somehow needs to be fixed. And sometimes that can creep into the idea that the mind is also a kind of machine that breaks and need to be fixed. And I think that a lot of our modern thinking about like mental illness simply as brain problems, as if it's nothing other than just something that's going on with the brain that needs to be tweaked or fixed. I think that draws on that image of the mind or the brain as a kind of machine. In psychiatry, we often do this in a little bit more roundabout way, but what often happens in my practice, in terms of the way that I was trained, is that somebody will come to me with, we might say broadly, unwanted experience or behavior. Somebody's feeling like ways they don't want to feel. They're not performing at work or school in ways that they want to perform. Something's getting in their way. And they come to me and I say, oh, I know how to recognize that. What you have is symptoms. So I kind of change the language of somebody's coming in with this experience they don't like, and I say that's a symptom of anxiety or of depression or of psychosis or something else. And then I kind of gather those symptoms together and I say, well, this collection of symptoms means that you have a diagnosis or a disorder, like generalized anxiety disorder or major depressive disorder or bipolar disorder. And then I can kind of pull from my toolbox of evidence-based treatments, whether that's medication or whether that's individual psychotherapy, to treat the symptoms of the disorder. And so, I might prescribe a medication to someone, and then they come back in, 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and they tell me how they're doing. And if their symptoms have improved, I say, great, the treatment's working. And so mental health care becomes this practice of kind of, applying techniques or technologies to reduce symptoms, and successful care is what happens when the symptoms are reduced. Mm. And of course, anything that you can then apply, you can buy or sell. And so that we have this mental health economy that comes from people buying and selling and purchasing treatments. And I think there's lots of good things about that way of thinking. I certainly want my patients at the VA to have fewer symptoms and to have less distress. That's a good thing. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a few problems with it too. I think one thing is that it teaches us that mental health problems are something that's broken inside a person, and that they're like my problems inside me individually. So they're my individual problems. And it takes away from our attention to relationships and to our communities and to our culture as things that might give rise to our distress. And so it leads to an individualism that I don't like. Related to that, it focuses on the body and the brain as the site of what's broken, whereas it might be that actually what's not right is our relationships, our community, like the broader culture around us. It leads us to think that successful treatment is just a matter of reducing symptoms instead of living wholly and purposefully and fully in the world. And I think that's what Christians ought to want and strive for. And I think it also doesn't always address the really important questions that people ask, like, who am I? And what does it mean to be a human being? And am I loved? And do I matter? Do I belong? Those are key questions that are ours as humans that if we just focus on care as just reducing symptoms, it might never get to. So that's the machine metaphor that I think, has a certain kind of place, but isn't sufficient. And so how might Christians think differently? Well, in the book, I draw on this 13th century philosopher and theologian, Thomas Aquinas, who's pretty well known in Catholic circles, not as well known in Protestant circles. And so why am I, as a kid who grew up Southern Baptist in South Carolina, reading Thomas Aquinas? I think he's an amazing Christian thinker who lived and wrote at a time when he was trying to make sense of the science of his time. He had this beautiful account of what it means to be human before God, this beautiful account of the human being as a wayfarer or as a pilgrim on the way to God. And I think St. Thomas Aquinas's vision of the human being as a pilgrim or wayfarer really captured my attention. And so in the book, over a bunch of chapters, I talk about like 4 things that I think are really central for Christians thinking about how do we engage modern mental health care. And the first, I think, is probably the most important thing that I can say today, which is that the deepest truth of who we are is not our diagnoses, it's not our labels, it's not our treatment, it's not anything about us except that we are, and that God loves us and knows us. The deepest truth of who we are is that we're known and loved by God, and part of God's good creation, and invited, made in the image of God, and invited into the life of the Trinity, through grace. And that's one thing. I think another thing that I talk about in the book is that, the Bible teaches from the very beginning of Genesis that we are creatures of earth. We're dust. And so our bodies are dust. We're material creatures that, and our bodies get tired, and they age, and, they hurt sometimes, and they do get disease sometimes. And so Christians have nothing to fear. In fact, we can embrace like research that's been done into the neurobiology and biology of mental illness, and can embrace biological kinds of treatments. So that's all. Christians can embrace that. And though we're not just like bodies, we're bodies in relationship. Like we love and we grow and we learn who we are in and through relationships with others that have formed us from the very moment of conception. And certainly we learn who we are in relationship with God. And so we're relational beings. And so how we suffer then sometimes it has to do with what's happening in and with our bodies, but sometimes it's what's happening in the relational world that we live in. So, and that I think is a biblical way of thinking about what it means to be human. The third thing, as I've said, is that we are wayfarers, that we are those who are created by God. We're on the way to God. And the fourth thing is that, and this is a little bit hard, sometimes hard to say, that so often we think about the purpose of any kind of healthcare, but especially mental health care, is just getting control. Like we want to be in control of our experience, want to be in control of our bodies, and we want to be in control of others. And control is a good thing. I work at the VA with a lot of trauma survivors, and so having basic control over what happens in your life and your body, and not being vulnerable as one is before, is really important. So control is a good thing. But if the whole purpose of what we're doing in our lives is trying to gain control over ourselves or over others or over our bodies, then we're going to give a lot of allegiance and authority to whomever or whatever has put us in that position of control, whether that's a leader, whether that's a medication, whether that's a system. And so, and we can begin to make it into a kind of idol. Like we can think of like, this is the thing that I need to, to stay in control. And I think we have to be a little careful not to make control itself the highest good, because as humans, we're not primarily here just to be in control. We're here to love, to be deeper and fuller lovers of God and of other human beings and of the world around us, and especially of ourselves. And so are we growing in love in the way that we engage mental health care? And I think that's an important thing. So in the book, I say, like, good mental health care happens when clinicians who are ourselves on a journey, I'm a wayfarer just like everybody else is, come alongside others who are on a journey and ask the central question, not like what's broken and need to be fixed, but rather what's needed right now for the journey that this person is on. And that's how we move forward together.
One of the things, kind of one of the running themes from our conversation so far is the importance of recognizing who you are and being in community with others, being in community with God, being in relationships. And for me, that's an important part of my treatment plan, is to be in a support group or have an accountability partner, or something like that, where I am in a relationship with others. Can you talk maybe just a little bit more about the importance of forming relationships as part of being mindful of your mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a Christian truth. It's also just a general psychological truth that relationships are so critically important for us. I mean, attachment theory tells us, and many other ways of thinking about development tell us that, like, our ability to gain and to maintain a healthy sense of self, like to be a kind of self who can, go to school and who can navigate relationships, and who can go through challenges and trials and say, I can do this. Like, that ability to be a self relies on other people having first invested in us, having attended to us, having focused on us, having helped us to shape our own experience. And of course, we all have different experiences of that. Some people have gone through childhood and have had caregivers who were absent or who were distracted, and that can often be challenging. Some people have benefited from caregivers who were, very attentive to their experience and helping them to shape things, and that tends to help. Attachment theory tells us this. But throughout our lives, like, we depend on healthy relationships to become who we are and to find meaning and fulfillment. And so relationships are central to who we are, and I think that's just built right into Christian faith. God knew us before we knew ourselves. God loved us before we knew what it meant to love. We're born into relationship. So unlike there's some ways of thinking in modern mental health that's like, well, people just need to find their own meaning. Like, people need to find something that is meaningful for them. And the idea behind that is that we're just these kind of accidental organisms that are just kind of dropped into the world, and we have to find meaning wherever we can, and pull from it. And Christian faith says, no, like that's not true. Like you're born into the world with with an irrevocable, essential belovedness because God loved you before you were. And so I think there's that way in which like we're born into God's love, we're sustained by God's love. That's where we find our meaning and our purpose. And that's something that Christians can really celebrate and hold on to.
When we stop and think about who we are, that's one of the things that I'm kind of getting from some of what you have shared today, is that really it's about who we are.
Yeah.
And that's where we
Yeah.
start.
Yeah. It starts with who we are. And who
Yeah.
we are is
Yeah.
God's beloved creatures, made in God's image, like beloved of God, and invited into the very life of God. So when Galatians 4 and Romans 8 talks about how, the Spirit calls out with our spirit that we're children, children of God and can cry out, Abba, Father. Like the image there is that the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, invites us into the very life of Jesus, so that we stand before the Father as the Son does and can cry, Abba, Father. And the Spirit is the love that's mediating that relationship. And so, like we have the opportunity through grace, it's through the work of Christ and through the work of God to be folded into and held in the very life of God. And we're never alone. Even if we feel like we're completely
Yes.
alone, we're never alone because we're held by the Spirit in the life of God.
It's an incredible gift, isn't it?
It is a gift.
The Lord
It's
has
absolutely a
poured
gift.
out. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Warren, our time is really slipping away here. And so I want to give you an opportunity to share where we can find your book. Is it out now? When will it be out? So can you give us a little bit more information? Because I know I have the book and I've read parts of it, but I can't wait to read the whole thing. Where can someone find you and your book?
Thank you, Carolyn. Well, the book is published by Erdman's Publishing. Its title is Wayfaring: A Christian Approach to Mental Health Care. It's out now, and so it can be bought on any online or physical bookstore. And I just appreciate all those who are engaging it and who are interested in it. I can easily be reachable. I'm a faculty member at Duke University, and if you Google my name, you'll easily find information about how to contact and reach me. And also I'd invite anybody who wants to study with us in our Theology, Medicine, and Culture initiative at Duke to go to our website. You can easily find it by Googling Duke Theology, Medicine, and Culture, and you can see what our programs are. And we'd love to engage with you and just really appreciate all those who are listening today and who care about these topics, because that's really a gift for people to care.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Warren. I will have lots of information in the show notes, your contact information and other things. So please check those out. This has been a very uplifting and enlightening conversation. Thanks again for being here today, and God bless your continued work.
Thank you, Caroline. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for your own work and ministry. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining me today, and please share your comments. Join the conversation on mental health and faith, and I would love to hear from you. My email is Carolyn, that's spelled Caroline, Carolyn at carolinscooper.com, and my contact information is also in the show notes. Have a blessed day.